This is Estonia, one of the 3 Baltic states and a member of the United Nations. It is home to 1,319,000 people, and today it is a fully independent state. However, things have not always been this way. Through peaceful protest and economic reconstruction, Estonia broke the historic barriers of communism and achieved independence. Sovereignty through song. On August 23, 1939, Vyacheslav Molotov, chairman of the Council of People's Commissars, and Joachim Ribbentrop, foreign minister of Germany, signed a treaty called the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. The pact allied Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union and divided Europe between the two empires. 1 week later, on September 1, 1939, Hitler invaded Poland from the west. Stalin then proceeded to invade Poland from the east, and so the Second World War began. On September 24, 1939, following the Soviet invasion of Poland, warships of the Red Navy appeared off Estonian ports. Stalin had issued an ultimatum, threatening to invade Estonia if it did not allow him to maintain military bases and station 25,000 troops there. Estonia agreed after the Soviet Union promised to honor Estonia's sovereignty. He issued similar demands to the other Baltic states, and having seen the fate of Poland, the 3 Baltic countries saw no alternative but to comply. As expected in June of 1940, the Soviets broke their promises. Stalin ordered for a total military blockade of Estonia by the Soviet Baltic Fleet. And while the rest of the world's attention was focused on the fall of Paris to Nazi Germany, the Soviet Union invaded Estonia, as Molotov had accused the Baltic states of conspiracy against the Soviet Union. They delivered an order to Estonia for the establishment of a government approved of by the Soviets, to which the Estonians did not resist, because resistance to the overwhelming Soviet force would have resulted in great amounts of bloodshed and open war. The same thing happened in Latvia and Lithuania, the other Baltic states, but no one came to their assistance.
The Soviet Union carried out a communist coup d'état supported by the Soviet troops, followed by parliamentary elections where only communist candidates were allowed. On July 21, 1940, the elected parliament proclaimed Estonia a socialist republic and requested that Estonia be accepted into the Soviet Union. Those who refused to vote Estonia into the USSR were shot in the back of the head by Soviet tribunals. On August 6, 1940, Estonia was formally annexed into the Soviet Union and renamed the Estonian Soviet Socialist Republic. Immediately, Soviet authorities began imposing a regime of terror, creating a barrier between the Estonians' freedom and quality of life. During the first year of Soviet occupation, over 8,000 people, including most of the country's leading politicians and military officers, were arrested. About 2,200 of the people arrested were executed in Estonia, and most of the others were transported to Gulag prison camps in Russia. On June 14, 1941, mass deportations took place simultaneously in all 3 Baltic countries, with about 10,000 Estonians being deported to Siberia and other remote areas of the Soviet Union. After the German invasion of the Soviet Union in 1941, of the 32,100 Estonian men who were relocated to Russia, almost 40% died within the next year in the labor battalions of cold, hunger, and overworking. On September 18, 1944, after a loss at the Tallinn offensive, the Germans finally started to retreat from Estonia. Yuri Uluots, the last prime minister of the Estonian Republic prior to Soviet occupation, assumed the role of president, as said in the Estonian constitution, and appointed a new government while seeking recognition of independence from the Allies. On September 22, 1944, as the last German units pulled out of Tallinn, the city was reoccupied by the Soviet Red Army. The newly formed Estonian government fled to Stockholm, Sweden, and operated there in exile, leaving Estonia once again under dictatorial reign.
In 1947, the first song festival, Ladu Pidu, was held during Soviet occupation. At this festival, Gustav Ernstnak wrote a tune set to the lyrics of an old national poem written by Linda Koidula, Mu Isha Ma on Minu Arm, meaning, land of my fathers, land that I love. This song managed to get by Soviet censors, and for the remainder of the time that Estonia was under Soviet occupation, It served as a musical statement of every Estonian's desire for freedom. After the first performance, the song was banned from song festival programs until the early 1960s, when Estonians started defying singing the song against Soviet wishes, and by 1965 it was openly included in the song festival program. At the song festival program in 1969, the choirs on stage and the audience began singing Mu'i Shama on Mi Nu Arm, a second time for the 100th anniversary of the song festival. They received certain Soviet orders to cease singing and leave the stage, but no one complied. The Soviets attempted to put an end to defiant singing by having a military band play to drown out the singers, but it was not successful. The instruments were not capable of stopping the hundreds of thousands of singers. From then on, the song was sung repeatedly in the face of authorities, and there was nothing the Soviets could do about it except watch as a barrier between Estonians and freedom began to come down.
After Mikhail Gorbachev came to power in 1985, he established policies of economic reconstruction and free speech in the Soviet Union.
And of course, changing the economic system completely, almost all property. Only private property that could be had was one family houses and a small garden plot. Everything else belonged to the state or to the collectives, which were effectively state-controlled.
As a part of the economic reconstruction, he had plans of expanding phosphorate mining in northern Estonia, and first publicly announced them on February 25, 1987, through Estonian television. This became a great concern of the Estonian people, as phosphorate mining has a heavy impact on the water quality, air quality, and overall landscape appearance, and they had not even been consulted about the plans. Numerous protests broke out and petitions were signed against the new mines. Slowly but surely, the demonstrations began to grow in intensity. By the late 1980s, 6 new rock songs had also become rallying cries for independence and were repeatedly sung in large public gatherings such as the Tartu Pop Music Festival in May of 1988 and the Summer Rock Festival. Momentum and courage grew, but most importantly, the Estonians began to understand that as long as they did not enter in any physically assertive demonstrations, the Soviet Union government would not send in tanks or the military to stop demonstrations. This was possible because Gorbachev had worked very hard to keep a carefully cultivated image, and a blatant censorship would mean failure and international intervention. By the late 1980s, even the Estonian ruling Communist Party had joined in on calling for greater autonomy. Now having governmental approval for their protests and demonstrations, the amount and scale of peaceful protests increased. On August 23, 1989, the 50th anniversary of the Soviet takeover of the Baltic states, 700,000 Estonians joined 500,000 Latvians and 1 million Lithuanians in linking hands to form a human chain spanning from Vilnius to Tallinn, known as the Baltic Chain, to protest Soviet rule over the Baltic states. The Estonian government declared it a public holiday and even helped with coordinating the massive protests. The protests helped to publicize the Baltic cause internationally, show solidarity among the Baltic people, and reinforce the promise of nonviolent revolution. Over the next 2 years, mass gatherings continued to take place, and the Estonian Congress was formed to start building up the independent state of Estonia and to represent the people of Estonia. Seeing an opportunity during the hardline coup in Moscow, on August 20, 1991, the Supreme Soviet of the Republic of Estonia approved the Declaration of Estonian National Independence, coordinating with the Estonian Committee, formally repudiating Soviet legislation. Soviet tanks crossed into the Republic the next day in an effort to suppress further Estonian efforts, but were incapable of reaching broadcast towers because the Estonians surrounded them, including the critical Tallinn broadcast tower, as peaceful shields which impeded their seizure by Soviet forces. After hearing the coup collapsed in Moscow, Soviet troops abandoned the TV tower and left Estonia, and on September 6, the Soviet Union officially recognized Estonia's independence. Just like that, Estonia had managed to gain independence from the Soviet Union, breaking down the barrier between them and their freedom, all while making use of the nationalism that songs are able to spark within all and maintaining a nonviolent agenda.